Welcome in, race fans. This edition of Through the Gears presented by Front Stretch. I'm your host, Tino, and I couldn't be more excited to be back talking this NASCAR racing action that we're preparing for from a betting standpoint for this weekend at North Wilkesboro Speedway because we're going all-star racing. And that to me is one of the favorite things that I love to hear each and every season when it comes time to get to the all-star race. It is midway through the regular season, so it gives us time to really sort of relax, take in the racing that we've seen thus far this season, and ultimately get excited for what's to come as well. From a betting standpoint, things are going to be a little bit different, and I'll get into that as we go longer on into the show. And I got to give a special shout out though as well, because we had some guys in the chat commenting on our last video, and I really appreciate that. Remember guys, like, share, comment, it all means the world to me, so please keep doing it. Kyle B8 was one of them, and he was rooting for Brad and RFK, also Kyle Busch, but Brad ended up getting the win at Darlington. We'll dive more into that as we go into our Darlington recap, but happy for him, happy for Brad, happy for everyone involved, as it was a great race at Darlington Raceway last weekend. Also, my man Oscar said Austin Dillon in the Tracker 3, the gold car, was his favorite for Throwback Weekend. I got to agree with that one, but I'm a little biased. My man Donald Veal said Ross and Noah were, two guys that he maybe thought were going to win the race or had a chance to do so. Maybe like their throwback schemes as well. I definitely know that I did in that race. And it was just a great race overall. We'll get more into that. Got to give a special shout out to those guys there, and also Mr. Hartman for tuning in, my man Miami Mike, and also Seth Woolcock, as he had me on his show over at In Between Media. So you guys can check that out, as we covered a lot of all-star preparation, strategy, betting advice, and much more. I'll be doing that now post-practice and qualifying that the Cubs guys had over in the beginning of this weekend. So I'll be going over how the odds have shifted and changed since then, and some of the strategies that we talked about over there on Seth's show as well. So be tuned into that, because that was a very long breakdown. We went over an hour and a half just getting into everything you guys need to know, from the All-Star Open to the main race and everything in between, with a lot of different things happening this weekend. I'm covering it here on Through the Years as well, but if you want a longer version, head over there to In Between Media and check that one out. I was happy to be on with my man Seth, and I'm happy to be here for Through the Gears and excited to talk NASCAR betting with you all now. So without further ado, let's go through the gears. All right, guys, now let's get into the Darlington recap, because that was a fantastic race for what it was. First off, we gotta say, did end up cashing out on Brad Keselowski winning that race. We got him at 9-1 after practice and qualifying. And I know midweek when we had Through the Gears, we had my man Derek Yoder on, and we were talking about different strategies, different guys that could win the race. And I was a little bit surprised, because I thought Kyle Busch would be a factor, Ross Chastain, and Chevy would show a little bit more speed than they ultimately did. That's why, if you were a little bit surprised there by the direction that Ford was in, you got to make sure you're staying tuned to the Front Stretch Podcast Network, but also Tino Pattigno and all my accounts there at Tino Pattigno, because I was giving you guys a little bit of updates there, sharing out my most updated picks after practice and qualifying, because that's just something that we always need to be aware of after the early starts of the weekend where practice and qualifying happens. Maybe we see a little bit more speed out of a certain manufacturer or team, like we did that weekend with RFK and Ford bringing the speed. And honestly, I say and Ford, but Michael McDowell was up there. Todd Gilliland was also showing some speed there within the top 15, but it really was RFK that have been leading the field in terms of Ford performance and Ford speed. We talk about Team Penske a lot, and rightfully so. I mean, Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano are the past two champions, but they have not figured it out. And RFK seems, after watching Kansas and Chris Buescher being up there racing in the closest finish in NASCAR history, looks like he was going to get the win, and ultimately he doesn't. But my point is, Chris Buescher has been there, and when he's hot, it just continues to go on for quite a while. We saw that last year once he was able to lead laps and get up towards the front and win races. Chris Buescher knocked off the 3 wins in a matter of 6 or 7 weeks there last season in the summer stretch. So the fact that we're at the All-Star break now and Ford finally breaks through, they get back to victory lane. Brad Keselowski snaps the 110 race winless streak. That is huge for RFK, but also Ford, like we mentioned. Now, this was a race primarily dominated by Tyler Reddick. He led the majority of the race, and it was really a 3-car battle between Tyler Reddick, Chris Buescher, and Brad Keselowski. And the fact that that was the case, but the racing was still so good between those 3 drivers, really saved this race in terms of it being, good or bad. But I think not only did it save it from that standpoint because we had racing action happening all throughout the pack, but it made it one of the best races so far this season. And we talked last week about how this racing product that we see week in and week out, to me, makes this season potentially one of, if not the best ever. And I'm glad Darlington provided another great NASCAR racing day overall and race itself. Great battles between those 3 drivers at the end. Chris Buescher looks like he has the car that could win the race. Brad Keselowski had it. Then Chris Buescher makes a 3-wide pass, gets the lead. Tyler Reddick ultimately runs out of racetrack, rubbing his racing, but he rubbed Chris Buescher the wrong way. They had a little post-race beef as, Chris Buescher was not happy with Tyler Reddick as they ultimately, he shoved him a little bit, but mostly telling him that they race each other hard, they race each other clean all the time, and he was very frustrated, Chris Buescher was, with ultimately ending his day towards the back of the pack, not able to get the win, but also not able to finish inside the top 3 like he deserved, or ultimately get the win like he could have as well. And put yourself in Chris Buescher's shoes here, because it is insanely hard to win these NASCAR Cup Series races. We talk about that, or the drivers talk about that so many times, that it is so hard to win these races, whether it be due to the competition in the field or just what it takes to put the parts inside the car and the engines. And we see our past champions and Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano struggling right now. We talked about how Ford hasn't made it to victory lane all season. So with all this being said, and being Chris Buescher, right? And he's a veteran now, but we know that Chris Buescher did not start off in race-winning equipment. He worked his way, clawed his way to be where he's at right now. So for him to understand how hard it is to win for a driver like Chris Buescher specifically, and then lose the past 2 races from Kansas to Darlington like he has, oh, baby. I know Chris Buescher is out looking for revenge. Maybe it won't happen this week at the All-Star race, because I think he's more focused on getting that Coca-Cola 600 victory. But let's not get ahead of ourselves as we now look at the All-Star race heading into this weekend at North Wilkesboro Speedway. I'm happy that we're back there, but we need to remember too, right off the bat here, this is one of the oldest tracks in NASCAR history. It's so historic for many different reasons, but let's not forget, it's the newest repaved track that we're going to be seeing so far this season, as it got a repave right after the Cup guys left and the trucks left last season. So that's something to consider, because the tire wear is going to be different. Some of the strategies will be different because of the tire wear not being what it was, and the grip levels and all these different things, because that's what the All-Star race really is. They compile a bunch of different formats and formulas and things that we need to try to figure out, and strategies that we may not even understand, and bet on them and win. And that's what we're going to do. So let's dive into that a little bit further here with some betting strategies that we can look at, and some preparation, because North Wilkesboro, is there any tracks comparable to it? Let's talk about that now. It's a unique track, a 0.625 mile long short track. What makes this one different from other tracks too, aside from how short of an oval it is it has a trademark uphill backstretch. So when they're coming down, they're actually going uphill on the backstretch and then downhill on the front stretch. It's almost as if it was built on an angle there. And it went from the oldest surface, like I mentioned, to now the newest one with that repave happening. Now, there's no real primary comparisons we can make to this track, but some of the ones that I have been looking at are Martinsville, because Martinsville is the shortest track that we do race at for points paying races. But another one is the LA Coliseum. And the biggest thing that I could take away from there is the repave, because every time we race at the LA Clash at the Coliseum, it's repaved. So I feel like with the Martinsville stats and some of the data we have from the LA Clash, I think those combined can help us sort of prepare for North Wilkesboro. I'm going to look at some results from this race last year as well, but there's a lot of different factors coming into play, and the biggest thing is the Open. There are not the same drivers racing in the All-Star race that will be locked in come time to race in the All-Star race this season or this weekend. I mean, the biggest thing to me is Bubba Wallace finished in second in the main All-Star race, and now he's racing in the Open to get into it. We'll break that down a little bit later when we get to the odds breakdown in the All-Star Open, which is going to get its own segment here, because that is something I'm focusing on heavily, maybe even more than the All-Star race itself. Before we do continue on and talk about the odds breakdown and everything that you guys need to know in terms of who to bet on and why certain drivers are priced differently, there is some more strategies that will come into play for this race. I want to break down the format of the All-Star race, the All-Star Open, and a bunch of things that are going on this weekend. Now, at the time of this recording, North Wilkesboro Speedway is currently underwater because of the rain that has been happening, the thunderstorms, the lightning hold. The Truck Series race at the time of this recording is currently postponed to Sunday. That'll be Sunday morning before the All-Star Open and before the All-Star race. That's something to consider, because the original schedule that we had for this weekend was Friday practice, qualifying for the Open and the All-Star race. Now, qualifying for the Open was canceled. For the All-Star race, we did get that in at the time of this recording today. Now, that's going to be important to note, and I'm glad to say special edition of Through the Gears here, because I really wanted to see the type of tire wear and the type of drivers that would be able to manage this option tire, which I'm getting into now. Perfect segue to talk about it, that they will be bringing to the track this weekend. So what is this option tire? What is this prime tire? What is this rain tire? What are you talking about, Tino? Let's talk about it now, because there are, along with the format, here's the tire rules. We'll talk about the tires first. The prime tires are what we're used to seeing on the track. They're made to wear. I know with this new slick repave, we could see more grip, and we could also see less grip based off the certain grooves and rubber that is being applied to the racetrack. Prime tires, regular tires. Option tires, though, that's where things get interesting, because there are new tires that will use rubber kind of similar to the rain tires. But I wrote this down here, and this is important, so listen up for this one. I'm going to give you a little teaching lesson about these tires, like Steve Letarte taught me on Dirty Mo Doe from Dirty Mo Media this past weekend as I tuned into their show there. He provided a lot of great insight as he former crew chief himself, so I'm glad that he did so. So, like I mentioned, the prime tires are the natural normal tires, but the options ones, they have more grip for a shorter amount of time. So you can expect 20 to 30 laps of faster speeds out of those tires, and then once that runs out and the grip goes away, it'll be slower than the normal tires that will be running. Now, what's interesting about this is the fact that teams can figure out whenever they want to use these tires. And now we're getting into the format. So for the All-Star race format, it's going to be 200 laps with a 4-tire pit stop at lap 100. There's going to be a caution at lap 150, no requirement to pit there, but this is where the strategy comes into play. And we saw it last year with Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson goes into pit earlier than anyone else, switches his tires, has a little bit of strategy there from the crew chief, and then goes from last to first and dominates the All-Star race there. So I'm expecting, with all that being considered, and the format and the tires and the strategy that can come into play, it's a lot to take in. But to me, when I think about these things, I think about which drivers are going to be able to adapt and overcome to these changes the best. And it's not only going to be the drivers, it's going to be the crew chiefs and the team and the crew members on pit road. So who's popping off in your mind right now? Well, it should be Denny Hamlin, because Denny Hamlin has the most complete team so far this season. Chris Gabehart has been fire on the booth, or up on the box rather, and everything like that his pit crew's been able to win him races so far in the season has been huge. So Denny Hamlin's a driver that pops into my mind. Obviously, you mentioned Kyle Larson, but Kyle Larson won't be racing in the heat races. Well, does that really matter? No, because the heat races were canceled this weekend. The reason why Kyle Larson isn't, by the way, is he's qualifying for the Indy 500 coming up next weekend. So he's busy there, but Kyle Larson is a driver that can roll out of bed and win on any given day. So that's something I'm not really worried about for Kyle Larson and his team. I know that Cliff Daniels is going to have everything locked and loaded for him, and that team's going to be ready to go. So Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson, much like we've seen so far this season already, I expect them to have that same mentality when it comes to being prepared for the different format, the different tire, and for the different strategies we may see inside this all-star race this weekend. Now, with the Open as well, that has a certain format. It's going to be 100 laps with 4 tire pit stop at lap 50. And there will be 1 overtime attempt there. Looking at the certain drivers that are in the field, that's where I get excited for the All-Star Open a little bit more than the All-Star race itself. We'll get into that in the next segment coming up shortly, but just to figure out the schedule of things now. So no All-Star heat races. Those are rained out. The truck race is going to be on Sunday before the All-Star Open and the All-Star race. They did get qualifying in for the All-Star race itself, the main one. That is important to note as we will discuss the starting lineup and see how that will sort of determine the betting odds and how that impacts certain drivers that maybe show some value but are starting at the back of the pack. Let's get to the odds breakdown. Getting into our odds breakdown and breaking down everything you guys need to know for the All-Star race is going to be the odds breakdown for the main All-Star race. As we'll get to the All-Star Open next, we'll put the main guys and the top dogs up first as they do deserve it. This is the main show. This is the one most people are focused on. But I'll say for me, I'm more focused on the Open, and we'll get to why throughout this segment. So first off, just looking at the favorite on the board now, post qualifying, let's see now. Denny Hamlin at plus 380. He's going to be the favorite. William Byron at plus 600. Ryan Blaney plus 600. Kyle Larson plus 750. Immediately, let's stop. Kyle Larson for plus 750. I will be betting that number because to me, that is a good option of value for Kyle Larson. I know he hasn't had time in this car at this track this weekend, and he's going to be hopping in, rolling out of bed, like I mentioned before, and racing in this one. But the fact that the heat races were canceled, to me, provides us with a good opportunity to get value on Kyle Larson plus 750 because they won't these teams and drivers won't have that much of an advantage over Larson, who obviously dominated this race. I don't care if he's locked in like those other guys are or not. I believe he can go from Indianapolis to North Wilkesboro and dominate this race once again. So plus 750 for Larson is good. We'll stick with talking about the favorites for right now. Denny Hamlin at plus 380. Let's get back to him. I actually do still like the value there despite it being such a low number compared to everyone else. But we talked about why. His crew chief, his pit crew, he has the most complete team. And I think that's what it's going to take to win this all-star race because of the 4 tire pit stop at lap 100 and the different strategies that can come into play with the tire. Denny Hamlin also did note, and this is why I love doing this show now after practice, to understand how the drivers liked and managed the tires. Denny Hamlin said that he loved the option tire. So if Denny Hamlin's liking it, that to me is a good indication that he is going to go and race as hard as he can this weekend and feel comfortable doing so on a tire that he enjoys. I mean, some drivers maybe didn't like it. I didn't hear any negative comments necessarily, but I did hear positive things out of Hamlin, and that to me kind of just shows his mindset heading into this one. So I think that could be an advantage. The number before qualifying happened and the lineup was set for the All-Star race and before practice as well was at plus 550 for Hamlin. I obviously like that number more than plus 380, but I'm still on Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson heading into that one. And that's your favorites now. So let's move into drivers with more value. Tyler Reddick plus 1,000, Martin Truex Jr. plus 1,000 as well, Christopher Bell at plus 1,100. Then we have Joey Logano, same value there. Chase Elliott plus 1,300. Brad Keselowski, last week's winner, plus 1,400. Ross Chastain plus 1,600. Kyle Busch plus 1,800. And the list goes on from there. So to me, drivers that stand out immediately after saying that, Martin Truex Jr. is one of them. at plus 1,000. I do like the value there, but now I think it's a good time to, when we look at these drivers for high value, see where they're going to be starting at in this race. And I think that's a huge part, like I mentioned, about doing the show now after practice and after qualifying. We can now talk about where these drivers did qualify and where they'll be rolling off in this one. We didn't get the heat races, so that would have been something that also would have contributed to their starting spots, but I'm okay with not getting that because now we have practice to go off of and some of the data from qualifying. So let's now see for the drivers of higher value. We got Daniel Suarez starting 4th, Chris Buescher in 5th. We talked about him earlier. Martin Truex Jr. in 8th, AJ Allmendinger in 10th, Hamlin is 11th, and Larson 12th. So to me, something that I'm thinking about right away is Martin Truex Jr. starting 8th. This is a driver, when we talked about the LA Clash, he ran inside the top 3 there. Won there last year. And I think that was very important to see. So he's shown speed there. Martinsville, they didn't really bring it so far this season at that track, but in the past, he's just been a good short track racer, as Truex has been, and he grew up racing on shorter tracks like North Wilkesboro Speedway. So that's important to note. I like the value for Martin Truex Jr. If I had to sort of analyze another driver out there, it would be Joey Logano, because Joey Logano is starting on the pole. And to me, for Joey Logano starting on the pole, obviously at a short track where it's going to be rubbing his racing and hard to pass drivers, and you're going to need to be aggressive. To me, Joey Logano starting on the pole is huge for track position. We saw it at Darlington, and obviously completely different track, but getting off a pit road, Tyler Reddick, almost every single stop, was the first driver off pit road because he had the first pit stall, because he won the pole. To me, Joey Logano sitting at that P1 position and also sitting on our odds board here, plus 1,100. I love that value, and I love Joey to potentially go another LA Clash winner. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. I just feel like he's a driver, and also led laps at Martinsville earlier this season, finished 4th in the LA Clash this season as well. So to me, Joey Logano stands out to me as a driver that hasn't showed much speed this season, actually been struggling a lot this season. They can turn things around at the All-Star race, and I think for a driver that doesn't have a win yet, much like MTJ, much like Joey Logano so far this season, I feel like this would be the perfect time to get it. It's storybook. That's the other thing when we're breaking down the odds. Let's break down how NASCAR works sometimes. Sometimes these drivers get a win and they're going to be happy about it. I mean, you're winning $1 million, but they'd much rather get the points paying victory that they've been trying to get so far this season. So I feel like a little bit of ironicness, if you will, has been known to happen before. So I can see Joey Logano or MTJ getting to victory lane. I love their value, and I love where they're starting and the All-Star race. So it's time for one of my favorite things in all of NASCAR, and it's actually the All-Star Open. Now, that may be funny to say, but I've got a history. Last year, Josh Berry, we cashed out major with one of my higher unit plays for Josh Berry to win the All-Star Open. And now we did have help last year from Michael McDowell and Ty Gibbs getting into it a little bit, which led Berry to get the victory there. But ultimately, a cash is a cash, and I'm super glad that I have that experience, because now I feel like we're in a similar position where Josh Berry is on the board, yes, and he does present value, but the experience we have in recognizing a winner and recognizing the value, especially in this All-Star Open, it's important to keep in mind there are not many drivers capable of winning this All-Star Open in the field because of the other equipment and the more power and the more strength of speed that I have seen out of certain drivers, out of certain manufacturers thus far this season. So who am I alluding to? Let's get right into it. It's going to be the Toyotas and Ty Gibbs. But hey, Alex Bowman. So we do have the starting lineup. Like I did mention, the qualifying for the Open was happening, and then it got rained out. Ty Gibbs and Alex Bowman were the last two drivers that had to qualify. They did not get the chance to do so. So the lineup is set based off of the current standing. So Ty Gibbs, who was in a very respectful top spot in the standings up there, I believe in 7th. He will be starting first in this one. Alex Bowman 2nd, Chase Briscoe 3rd, Bubba Wallace 4th, Noah Gragson 5th, Austin Cindric 6th, Josh Berry 7th, Todd G in 8th, and John Hunter Nemechek in 9th. I'll give you the top 10. Carson Hocevar in 10th there. So why is this important? Well, the fact is we know how important that this track position is in this race, but let's keep in mind why. It's only 100 laps. This is a mad dash. We're talking about a track that is 0.625 miles long. It is going to go very quickly. And to me, that's why you need to be able to manage your tires for how fast this race and this All-Star Open is going to go. There is a 4-tire pit stop at lap 50. Let's remember about that as well. So now when we're thinking about all these things in the format of this Open, Ty Gibbs to me stands out. He is a favorite at plus 130. Now, there's multitude of reasons why. I'll start off the first one. He has been strong on short tracks. He was leading laps at the LA Coliseum at the LA Clash earlier this season. At Bristol, he was in position to win, and he ultimately did not get the chance to do so because of the tire wear that he just wasn't able to manage his tires well enough to continue to hold on to the lead without ultimately blowing them off there with the insane tire wear that we saw at Bristol Motor Speedway earlier this season. Now, to me, Ty Gibbs, as much as I do like him, I'm a little cautious because I just mentioned 2 races in the LA Clash and Bristol. Now, he probably wins the LA Clash without a caution, but there's going to be cautions in this All-Star Open as well. So my point is here, Ty Gibbs has been in position to win races and has not gotten the job done multiple times this season. Now, I can see the storylines now. Ty Gibbs needs a breakout win. He's been close. He gets it at the All-Star Open, potentially even in the All-Star race. We also have to note the top 2 drivers advance. So if it's Ty Gibbs versus Bubba Wallace, who I like in this one to win it a little bit more than Ty Gibbs based off the value that's on the board for us here, then we may not see them being as aggressive to go out. That's a storyline. That's something that is a factor as well since the top 2 drivers advance. But I think since this is such close corners and aggressive racing, I don't think that'll come into play. I mean, it depends how far out of above the field they are. If these 2 Toyota drivers get off and just blast past everyone, then I don't think there will be aggressive racing, but I also just don't see that happening. Now, let's talk about Bubba Wallace. He's plus 350, the second favorite in this one. I liked him a lot more when he was plus 500 earlier this week, and that's when I hopped on him. We were talking about that on In Between Media with Seth Wilcock there. Bubba starting in 4th in this one, but why Bubba? Well, Bubba finished 4th at Martinsville earlier this season, and aside from that, he finished 2nd in the actual All-Star race last year as well. So to me, if he was able to do that in the actual All-Star race for an Open for him, this should be no problem. And at plus 350 now, I still like that price. I like both of these drivers to win this race. I really do. And that's why I've taken both of them. I hammered Bubba because of the value early on at plus 500. I would do the same at plus 350 if this was my first time seeing him as well. Now, for Ty Gibbs, I made a little adjustment there. I made sure to bet on Ty Gibbs because of everything I told you. And one thing that I have to mention as well is Ty Gibbs, the biggest reason that most people are talking about him this weekend as well is because there was a tire test at North Wilkesboro Speedway. And who was invited to that one for the Toyota drivers? None other than the driver of the 54 in Ty Gibbs. Just the luck of the draw there. Nothing we can, really say about that, but it is definitely an advantage. Like, we can't not say that will not be an advantage here. Ty Gibbs having extra laps, extra reps, extra experience with the tire at this repaved North Wilkesboro Speedway, I think will help him manage and ultimately win potentially this All-Star Open. I'm still high on Bubba Wallace, so I don't want to say Ty Gibbs just takes it because I really do think Bubba starting in the 4th position there. The true drivers in between those Toyotas there are Alex Bowman in 2nd and Chase Briscoe in 3rd. I just can't get behind Bowman in this one. I do know that 48 car won it last year, but that was Josh Berry, and he is in the Hendrick Motorsports equipment, so I do expect him to have a lot of speed in this one for Alex Bowman, but I just like the other drivers more. Chase Briscoe is another one at plus 900. If I had to pick a third, it would be him. And, like we mentioned, the first 2 drivers to finish advance, and then we have the fan vote. If I had to pick a fan vote winner, probably going to be Noah Gragson, although Hocevar has been putting up a great campaign. So maybe we could see him as well. The other thing we need to note is the pit stop at lap 50. That is huge. And Ty Gibbs' team is probably the best pit crew in this entire open field. So that's another thing that's important to note. Hopefully, with how things work there, maybe Bubba Wallace is ahead of him. But if not, look for Ty Gibbs to maintain a lead or even improve positions because of his pit crew. So for the open, I'm going Bubba Wallace as my main play in this one. I got 10 units on Bubba Wallace earlier this weekend, and then I put how many units did I do? 4.5 units on Ty Gibbs to win the open as well. Whether or not it's Bubba or Gibbs, I'm rooting for them both. Ultimately, I think Bubba is the better value there, and ultimately, based off of his speed at this track last season, I think that could give him the edge, but also Ty Gibbs with the tire test. So that's why it's back and forth there. But to me, it's going to be between those two Toyotas. The speed that Toyota has shown consistently throughout this season is something that I am very high on heading into this one. If I had to pick a third, like I mentioned, Chase Briscoe plus 900. That is good value there. Noah Gragson as well. He could be a play. Let's talk about his value there. Plus 1,200 for him. Ryan Preece plus 2,000. And Josh Berry, like I mentioned, we cashed on him last year, plus 400. I just can't get behind those SHR cars. Aside from a Briscoe, like I did mention, and I think Gragson will have a strong showing. But aside for Josh Berry and Ryan Preece, I was very high on them. If you guys have been tuning in for Martinsville, and they let us down. And Berry's pit crew let us down bad. He was battling in that race for a top 10 position, and then they just sent him to the back. So to me, at a track where position is going to be huge, and there is literally a pit stop, like on purpose to have the pit crews perform well in this all-star race to help their teams out, just like they do every single week. But this time it's going to be spotlighted just a bit more with it being a scheduled stop at lap 50 for all drivers. That's why I'm going with the trusted teams in 2311 and overall mostly Joe Gibbs Racing with Ty Gibbs there. So that's what I'm thinking for the All-Star Open. Let me know what you guys think. Do you prefer the Open or the main race? Obviously, I do prefer watching the main race, but I just feel like there's more value on the board here for this Open based off the guys that are driving in it this season who weren't able to lock themselves in to the main race. And we'll talk about the main one and some of the outright winners now that I have for that in this next segment here. But leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking about the All-Star Open and what are your thoughts on it overall. Guys, now that we went through the Darlington recap, the betting strategies, the preparation for North Wilkesboro, the odds breakdown, we got the All-Star Open figured out. It's time for the main thing. It's time for the real deal. It's time for the heavy hitters. It's time for the big dogs. It's time for the outright winners for the All-Star race. A lot of these drivers we did talk about when it came to the odds breakdown, so this may be a quicker segment than usual with it being the All-Star race weekend, but I'm happy to cover anything else you guys may have, so let me know in the comments below if you have any more questions. First off, Denny Hamlin, plus 380. I liked him more at plus 550, but I still think the value is there. I could see Denny winning this race based off the season he's had done. Kyle Larson's next up at plus 750. We will not see another Kyle Larson number for this value, maybe at a super speedway as everyone is 10 to 1 and up there, but at a regular racetrack, this number for Kyle Larson, to me, I'm taking that one there because of it being 750. He had to start in the back last season. I don't think it's going to be a problem in this one. So Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson, as usual, are the two drivers that I'm going to be locking in, or at least thinking about in this one first. Now, I'll give you two more drivers. It's going to be Joey Logano at plus 1,100 to me. We talked about Ty Gibbs doing the tire test. Well, the driver that represented the Ford camp was Joey Logano. So Joey Logano in leading laps at Martinsville, winning the LA Coliseum Clash at the Coliseum a couple years ago, finishing fourth at the LA Clash this season, qualifying on the pole, and taking part in the tire test is great value to have him at plus 1,100. I like those three drivers, and if I had to pick one more, it would have to be Martin Truex Jr. at plus 1,000. His pit crew has been shaky at times, so that's something that I am a little concerned about, but I do like MTJ and his short track experience to prevail in this one. Those are the 4 drivers that I will be picking outright to win the All-Star race, but I'm going to throw in one more for you guys there, and if he does end up locking himself in to the All-Star race and advancing out of the All-Star Open, keep an eye on Ty Gibbs. I know we're talking about him versus Bubba Wallace, but I do like him a little bit more when it comes to a longer green flag stretch with 200 laps, and especially if he is able to manage these tires like I think he does have the advantage of over those other drivers with having that tire test there and having one of the better pit crews even in the actual All-Star race as well. So those are 5 drivers that I like to win this one outright. If Ty Gibbs makes it in, I expect if he wins and makes it in, I expect his value to be probably anywhere from plus 800 to plus 1,000. Now, I would like to see more. I remember Josh Berry, if I'm not mistaken, after he won his All-Star Open last year, opened up at plus 2,000. But the thing was, he had to start from the back. He did have some inexperience racing with those higher caliber drivers that were in the main All-Star race there, as he was not a full-time driver last season in the Cup Series. So for Ty Gibbs there, it depends how he wins his Open or if he does win the Open, but anything plus 1,000 and more, I know he's starting in the back, but we know that it would be capable for him to charge through the field and to the front in that one. So those are 5 drivers I have my eye on for the outright winners. And that basically wraps it up for what my favorite plays are as well. I mean, Bubba Wallace for the Open, Ty Gibbs as well for the Open. And then if he makes it into the main race as well, keep an eye on Denny Hamlin, like I said. Pretty much a shorter, more concise episode of Through the Gears for this one this weekend, just because of everything that goes into play for the All-Star race. I didn't include any prop bets because I'm just not prop betting in this one. If you guys are or have any questions about that, let me know. But with it being the All-Star race and how heavy I am going on in the Open, I'm going to scale back a little bit here. With all the strategies and unknowns in terms of the tires, I think we did a great job breaking it down and analyzing how practice and qualifying went and knowing who went to the tire test, whether it was Joey Logano, Ty Gibbs, and also William Byron. I should mention that. But to me, I feel pretty confident and pretty comfortable going into this All-Star race weekend. Guys, that'll do it for another episode of Through the Gears. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to stay tuned to the stock car scoop that comes out after the race that hopefully will happen on Sunday, weather permitting. Currently, North Wilkesboro Speedway is underwater there. So hopefully they can figure some things out and get the track dry in time so we can get this awesome All-Star race weekend happening and finished as well as we prepare for the Go 600 next week. I'm super excited for that race. Got some big news about it, so stay tuned and tune in to Through the Gears next weekend as well. Who do you guys think is going to win the All-Star Open or the All-Star race? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe to the Front Stretch Podcast Network. Follow me on social media for more updates when it comes to the All-Star race or NASCAR content in general or NASCAR betting questions if you do have them at Tino, Pattigno. It's always a pleasure talking with you guys and interacting with the NASCAR betting community. And I'm super proud to have this platform and come on here and talk about this show and NASCAR betting as a whole each and every weekend for you guys there. I hope you enjoyed the special edition of Through the Gears for the All-Star race and actually including post-practice and qualifying efforts there. I was excited to be able to get this in and utilize that data that we saw there. I'll see you guys next week as we go Through the Gears.